Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. I have been looking forward to putting together this list. It's my top 5 hidden gem geek movies. Movies that I guess if you've been listening to my content, watching my content for a while, you've probably heard me mention them at some point. But I haven't reviewed any of these in, I think, of at least a few years. So it was fun to revisit these, to think about them again, and prepare this list. I'm going alphabetical here. I'm not going to try and rank them. I was just like, oh, that's more diminishing returns on that effort. So alphabetical order. And if you want the full review for each of these, if you're watching on YouTube, you can just search for each of these reviews on my YouTube channel. I'm also going to feature the audio for all of my full reviews of these movies on the Christian Geek Central podcast this weekend, episode 812. So you can find all 5 full reviews for these movies there. But let's get into it. First up, Boss Level. This is an action sci-fi comedy that stars Frank Grillo, who you would know in some supporting roles for some of the Marvel movies, but he's typically not going to be the main star. But I so appreciate him in this role, even though he's not like this great, nuanced actor. What he brings to this is it fits very well what he's been asked to do, playing a tough, gruff father who's like a special ops military guy that has neglected his relationship with his son, neglected his relationship with his wife to the point that they're divorced. But I mean, that's like the heartfelt stuff that I really appreciate. The main hook of this movie is it's an action Groundhog Day video game type of experience where he's not literally in a video game, but they're riffing on video games. They're counting. They got a body count for every time he dies, every time he fails at something. So there's just some nice little video game motifs going on. But the fun is really in seeing how he dies, how he deals with the fact that he's repeating the same day over and over and over again, and he's being hunted down by people and killed day after day. He has no idea why this is happening. And so his experience of just being bewildered by that whole thing is where a lot of the comedy comes from. But the action comes from the fact that he is a special ops guy. And so unlike other stories we've seen where you take a not awesome guy at the start and he becomes awesome, this guy becomes like, he starts awesome and then he becomes like insanely cool in what he's able to do because he's already at a strong starting place. So a lot of fun, cool action. As far as thematically, man, it really tugs on my heartstrings because a key part of the drama is this father-son relationship. As I said, he's neglected that relationship with his son. His marriage fell apart. He feels regret over that. And this story and this whole predicament, you wouldn't think so, but it really gives him reason to process those things and to seek restoration and healing. And so there's just some great themes of reconciliation, both in his relationship with his son and surprisingly, indications of reconciliation with his wife that he's divorced. And how often do you ever see that in movies? Oh my gosh, So anyway, Boss Level, easy to recommend, and it's probably one that you haven't seen unless you're familiar with my content already. The next one, oh man, Color Out of Space. This is a Nicolas Cage movie. Don't turn me off. It's Nicolas Cage, I mean, for me, it all depends on casting with him. He can be in some roles where he's just like, oh, this is weird, this is not working. And others where I'm like, wow, this is the perfect fit for him. And this feels like that kind of role. This is an adaptation of a classic H.P. Lovecraft short story by the same name, Color Out of Space, about a family on a farm trying to get away from the troubles of the world, and a meteorite lands and just starts twisting the environment and them. It starts in this great place of relatable, grounded family drama, but then increasingly becomes creepy and weirdly psychological and unsettling and then bizarre and then totally unleashed cosmic sci-fi horror. It's the combination of it being emotionally grounded in a way that can really move me because it's touching on some things that are these wild sci-fi versions of very relatable and tragic human realities that we all have to deal with, or either personally or we're adjacent to them at some point in our lives. So that that mix of being emotionally grounded and conceptually wild is such a cool thing about this movie. I thought the performances across the board were really great. As I said, Nicolas Cage, really good fit here. Starts out as this really sympathetic, warm father, and then just goes, as you can imagine if you're familiar with Lovecraft, to some really bizarre, unsettling, bad places. I love how it leverages practical effects in its body horror, in its creature effects. I think it probably had a fairly conservative budget, but really uses the budget well, I think. And other effects like color palette and its use of manipulating color. I mean, as you would guess, that's kind of a theme in this movie, to create this otherworldly, slightly off-putting vibe of the environment that they're in. Increasingly, I would describe it really as visually rich and increasingly so from beginning to end in a number of different ways. Thematically, a couple of beats I found interesting. There's a powerlessness to Wicca, which usually in a cosmic story like this, that's going to be the powerlessness of Christianity in some way. Man, there was some stuff that was really worthwhile for me in processing mortality, my own mortality, the mortality of my loved ones, the prospect of watching a loved one deteriorate and suffering. I found it very disturbing, but I found it very worthwhile to be disturbed in the way that it bothered me, the things that it led me to process, I think with the Holy Spirit in a way that brought me to a healthier place and pointed me in a good direction. So I think we have to make that choice with some movies. I'm not saying this is automatically going to do that for you. Certainly some people should not watch movies like this. But for me, I found it very worthwhile. So easy for me to not recommend, but say how much I appreciate Color Out of Space. Next up is Parallel. This is a sci-fi drama with some suspense elements, especially as you get deeper into it. Like a number of movies on this list, it does have not a big, huge Hollywood budget, but a smaller budget that's used really well. I think it was made in Canada, and the effects in it are modest, but conceptually it's very rich. It uses, I think, some skillful cinematography, some sound motifs to just do some interesting things that made me unsettled. It's got great atmospheric tension, I thought. It takes the concept of the multiverse, which is so overdone, so all over the place now, and this isn't even a recent movie, but already like 5, 6, whatever, 8 years ago that it was made, it was taking that concept and doing something totally different with it. Basically, they are leveraging the multiverse, not to explore, wow, what else is out there, but to figure out a way to get rich. That's the basic premise that it starts out with, and it really goes different places from there. Some real interesting monkey's paw scenarios where they are getting more than they really bargained for. There's at least one really dramatically moving scene. I also found that the performances, even though they're all unknowns to me, were really solid, and I always really appreciate that. So yeah, as far as themes, when they're traveling in these parallel realities, one or more of the characters start referring to the other people in these other realities as alts. And increasingly, as the story goes on, they are valuing them less and less, to the point where they're not even seeing them as real people that need to be cared about. They're just using them, taking from them, whatever. They're just alts. They're just those other people. And I think there's a really interesting parallel, no pun intended, to the way they're thinking of these other people and the way we can tend to think of demographics online. So maybe if you're like a conservative, maybe you think, oh, they're just a bunch of liberals, or maybe if so you can just name, like, if you're a Christian, you're thinking, oh boy, those angry atheists or whatever. We can inadvertently, hopefully never on purpose, start kind of grouping people into this stereotypical label, and it really kind of hardens our hearts to them and to being considerate and thoughtful and patient with them. And so I think there's an interesting kind of idea that lines up with our experience online that's worth considering. But even apart from that, parallel movie that's easy to recommend to those that are interested in sci-fi and drama. All right, 2 more left. Upgrade. Oh man, this is one of my, gosh, I think maybe all of these are what I say are some of my favorite movies of all time, probably, but certainly Upgrade. This is a sci-fi action drama horror. I don't know, the action sometimes is just brutal and can look like, what you would see in a horror movie. The story's about a man who becomes a quadriplegic very early on. This is even in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling anything. And he accepts this experimental procedure to help him walk with the assistance of an AI that he can hear speaking to him in his head, and also enables him to defend himself, to like do kung fu, and equips him to go out and try to get revenge on those who injured him and who killed his wife. Also, again, in the trailer, I'm not spoiling anything there. But man, I appreciated how much they leaned into the drama. After watching the trailer, I knew he was going to be a quadriplegic. I knew that his wife was going to die. But they leaned into it enough that I still felt like the fact that I wasn't surprised didn't take anything away from really feeling that. And that's so important because the investment in the character is what always, for me, makes the stakes meaningful when we're doing the action stuff. I don't really care about all the action and the pizzazz of that stuff if I don't feel the stakes because I don't care about the characters. So I love just how they lean into the drama early on to help me care about this character. Strong performance, I thought, from Logan Marshall Green. Lee Wanell directed this one, also directed the Invisible Man. I think he either co-wrote or directed or something. He's really the original Saw movie. He was one of the actors in, but I think he was also involved in the production or writing of that. Anyway, he has, since this movie and The Invisible Man, become a director that I'm like, I want to see whatever he's doing, because he really knows how to take something with a small budget and make it look like there's so much more money behind it than there is. Brutal, artfully choreographed and shot fight scenes are a big highlight here. And there are some great turns and major subversion of expectation. I won't say exactly when that happens, but man, it's so appreciated. On top of all that, it's got some really thoughtful and philosophical commentary on the nature of tech as we are integrating our lives with it more and more, on AI. And really, AI is ultimately treated in this movie the way I would prefer, and that I think actually is consistent with a biblical worldview. Most AI stories these days will say we should treat them like persons, that eventually they will become persons and just as valuable as us. We'll be able to upload our brains into them, which is complete nonsense when you try to break it down even from a naturalistic worldview. But that's a rabbit trail. I'm not going to get into that. But no, AI here is treated as I would like it to be, as cold, not a person, even though it creates some fun, kind of charming, cute moments. So the character and the audience were enjoying the AI, but at the end of the day, it's very clear this is not a person and should definitely not be thought of as a person. That's very clear by the end of the movie. Anyway, so much more I could say, but that's all I'll say for now about Upgrade. Wow. And finally, The Void, or as we say it in my house, The Void. I watched this one with one of my boys who's also a horror fan, and this is clearly Lovecraftian. It's but more of a love letter to Lovecraft than an adaptation of any of his particular works. So it's got that cosmic horror, body horror, creature horror. Just it's fear of the unknown is kind of like just a major element here. It was crowdfunded, but the budget is used very well. I know that's a recurring theme here. They really valued practical effects. They really appreciated the practical effects of monster movies from the 80s and wanted to take that and see what they could do with it. And I would actually say that it's easily on par, if not better than so many of my already loved practical horror effects movies from the 80s. So very The Thing inspired, John Carpenter's The Thing inspired creatures, multiple of them that show up early on. I mean, this story, as I really like, starts with grounded character drama. So again, it's important for me. I need to be invested in the characters. Otherwise, I don't care if they're getting killed horribly, I need to care about them. And then I'll be tense as I'm wondering, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to them? And they really set up the characters well for me. And this movie increasingly injects insane cosmic gore monster horror and then madness and otherworldly insanity. I'm really surprised it did not jump the shark, but instead I think made the right move of evolving into this unsettlingly calm and unknowable horror, this weird, quiet kind of horror that's just like, what the crap, So Great performances, once again, from all of the unknowns, and that really sells, as I said earlier, the cosmic horror. I need the performances to draw me in, and they do a great job in this one. Thematically speaking, yeah, it really is playing with the fear of the unknown, and more specifically, a fear of the afterlife and what comes next. And that's something certainly, personally, I have dealt with, struggled with. I've been through just a process in my life. And actually, when I talk about this process and a little bit of what's changed in me and how the Lord has kind of like brought me along through that, in the special features for my audio drama adaptation of From Beyond, which you can get at the $1 tier at patreon.com/spiritblade productions in multiple versions of that production. But anyway, yeah, so this idea of fear of the unknown is very personal to me. And I just appreciated how this movie led me to process some of my, not just my fear of the unknown in general, but my fear of the life after this one. And it all hinges on the character of God. That's the difference between the fear we might wrestle with about what comes after this life and the fear that these characters experience in Lovecraft stories, where these dark cosmic gods, that are all powerful, they are like totally taking over and destroying reality and stuff. It all comes down to the character of God. And there's so many things that I don't know about what comes after this life. As much as Scripture tells us, there's still so many things I don't know. And so that would lead me to fear, but I can remember the character of God, that God is good. And as Psalm 16:11 promises, that when we're in his presence, there are pleasures forevermore, even if we don't know what that looks like, So anyway, yeah, for multiple reasons for me personally, really, really appreciate The Void. All right, so that's my list. I would love to get any recommendations you have for hidden gems in geek genres. You can leave those in the comments below. And then as always, I hope you will check out christiangeekcentral.com. Tons of content for you there as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.